Nevada sells you the strip, the neon, the all-you-can-eat buffets, wide open desert, lots of sky, nothing to hide. At least that's what the state wants you to think. Behind the casinos, the federal government has been detonating nuclear weapons, aerosolizing plutonium, and seizing family land at gunpoint across this state for the better part of a century. These are 10 places in Nevada the government doesn't want you to find. Number 1. Project 57. On April 24th, 1957, the Atomic Energy Commission drove out to a 10 by 16 mile block of desert on the Nellis Air Force Range and deliberately blew up a nuclear warhead, not a nuclear detonation. They triggered the conventional explosives around the warhead's core asymmetrically, simulating what would happen if a weapon got damaged in an accident. What happened was a kilogram of aerosolized plutonium spraying across 800 acres of open desert. They'd placed animals in cages across the test zone beforehand to study what inhaling those particles would do to living things. Personnel who entered afterward wore full protective suits and respirators against alpha radiation. Then they fenced it off and essentially forgot about it. For nearly a quarter century, the contaminated zone sat abandoned while Area 51 grew right next door. The Department of Energy eventually dug up hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of radioactive soil, and the Desert Research Institute still operates air monitoring stations at the site today because the plutonium is still blowing in the wind. Number 2. Hawthorne Army Depot. This is the largest ammunition storage depot on the planet. 147,000 acres, 2,427 earth-covered concrete bunkers spread across the valley floor and surrounding mountains. Everyone entering is subject to search. The depot exists because of a catastrophe 3,000 miles away. In 1926, the Lake Denmark Naval Ammunition Depot in New Jersey exploded, killing 21 people and injuring 53. Congress decided the Navy needed a depot far from any population center. They picked Hawthorne for its isolation. By World War II, it was staging nearly the entire ammunition supply for American forces in the Pacific. Chemical weapons were stored here over the years, and areas remained contaminated by mustard gas. On March 18, 2013, a 60-millimeter mortar tube was double-loaded during a Marine Corps training exercise. The round detonated at the firing position. 7 Marines killed, 8 wounded. The tube had only fired 43 rounds in its career. 3 personnel were relieved of command. Number 3. Creech Air Force Base. 35 miles northwest of Las Vegas, pilots sit in ground control stations flying Reaper drones in active war zones via satellite link. When their shift ends, they drive 45 minutes back to the suburbs for dinner. The Batwing stealth drone that Iran claimed to have captured in December 2011 was operated out of Creech. Newly released imagery from 2026 showed those same stealth drones still present at the base alongside Reapers. Since 2009, anti-war groups have staged twice annual protests outside the gates. The first major action led to the arrest of the Creech 14, including a Franciscan priest. In 2015, over 100 people from 18 states converged on the base, and 34 of them were arrested for blocking entry points during shift change. A 2017 Department of Defense policy authorizes the military to disable or destroy civilian drones near the installation. Flying one into the restricted airspace is a federal crime. Number 4. Bravo 20 Bombing Range. The Navy drops 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs on 64 square miles of public land in the Carson Sink. It is the only Navy range in the continental United States authorized for ordnance that heavy. The land is held sacred by the Northern Paiute. The range has been active since 1944. In the 80s, photographer Richard Misrash documented the landscape. Bomb craters destroyed vehicles, the strange beauty of a desert systematically wrecked by ordnance. Those photographs ended up in the National Gallery of Art, the Metropolitan Museum, and the Getty. The only natural elevation on the range, a rock formation called Lone Rock, is described by the Center for Land Use Interpretation as especially pummeled. When conditions are wet, the bombing targets sit in standing water that can persist for weeks. The Navy keeps dropping ordnance regardless. And in 2022, Congress approved withdrawing over 558,000 additional acres for the range expansion, signed into law as part of the Defense Spending Bill. Number 5. Groom Mine. The Sheehan family's mining claims on a mountainside overlooking the Groom Lake facility go back to 1889. They had been on that land for 66 years before the military arrived to build what became Area 51. The property had a mine, family residences, historic equipment, and the graves of relatives. In 2015, after the family rejected a $5.2 million offer, the Air Force seized it through eminent domain. The government appraised the property at $333,300. Independent appraisals valued it between $44 million and $116 million. Family spokesman Joe Sheehan stated that relatives suffered radiation effects from atmospheric nuclear testing at the nearby Nevada test site. Livestock died from beta burns caused by fallout. When the seizure went through, the family left behind a 100-year-old blacksmith anvil, a 1929 Model A Ford, a 19th century steam engine, and the graves of Joe's father, his great-uncles, and a miner who died in 1917. The Air Force said the family interfered with flight tests. The family had been there first, by 66 years. Number 6. The Nevada National Security Site. Between 1951 and 1992, 928 nuclear devices were detonated here. 100 atmospheric, 828 underground, the most bombed place on Earth. On July 6, 1962, a 104 kiloton thermonuclear device was detonated 635 feet underground at Yucca Flat. It displaced 12 million tons of earth and created the Sedan crater, 1,280 feet wide and 320 feet deep. The sand at the bottom is fused together by the heat. Areas designated red zones contain soil contaminated with plutonium-239, which has a half-life of 24,100 years. Those zones won't be safe for human habitation for roughly 240,000 years. In 2019, 2 Dutch nationals were arrested 3 miles inside the perimeter. They told deputies they understood English but had ignored the warning signs because they wanted to see the property. They identified themselves as YouTubers. If you're learning something new, hit subscribe. We cover restricted and off-limits locations across every state every week. Number 7. Tonopah Test Range. By the late 1970s, the Air Force was running something at Tonopah that wouldn't be declassified for almost 30 years. The signs outside say deadly force is authorized. 625 square miles, no tour, no visitor center, no legal way near the airfield. From 1979 to 1988, the Red Eagles of the 4,477th Test and Evaluation Squadron trained American pilots in air combat against real Soviet-built MiG fighters. At peak operations, they flew 17 MiG-21s and 10 MiG-23s. Where the aircraft came from, through defectors, Allied intelligence swaps, and methods the participants still won't fully explain. The F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter operated from Tonopah for 7 years before the public knew the plane existed. Personnel were flown in daily on unmarked passenger jets from Las Vegas under a cover story about testing Corsair attack planes. Number 8. Yucca Mountain. 5 miles of tunnels bored into a volcanic ridge 100 miles northwest of Las Vegas. Somewhere between $15 and $19 billion in federal spending since 1987. And not a single gram of nuclear waste has ever been stored inside. The 1987 law that selected Yucca Mountain as the country's sole nuclear waste repository is commonly known as the Screw Nevada Bill. Nevada submitted a formal disapproval. Congress overrode it by wide margins. A 25-foot diameter tunnel boring machine excavated the main tunnel from 1994 to 1997. That machine is still sitting at the end of a second tunnel, probably never going to move again. President Obama cut the funding in 2010. A federal appeals court ruled the government couldn't legally abandon the project. Meanwhile, over 80,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel sits at 131 sites across 39 states in storage that was designed to be temporary. The Nuclear Waste Fund, collected from energy customers since the 80s, now holds $44.3 billion, earning interest, going nowhere. Number 9, Area 51. The CIA didn't officially acknowledge this place existed until 2013, 58 years after they built it. In 1989, Bob Lazar appeared on Las Vegas television claiming he'd been hired to reverse engineer alien propulsion systems at a facility called S4, built into a mountainside near Papoose Lake. He described 9 spacecraft and something called Element 115. No physical evidence of S4 has ever been confirmed. But here's the detail a lot of people missed. After Lazar went public, the government executed a land withdrawal that enclosed the exact vantage point from which civilians had previously been able to see the lakebed. Employees commute on unmarked white Boeing 737s from a restricted terminal at Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas. The call sign is Janet, popularly believed to stand for just another non-existent terminal. No schedule, no website, no phone number. In 2019, over 2 million people RSVP'd to Storm Area 51. They can't stop all of us. The Air Force warned it was prepared to respond. A few thousand showed up to a festival in Rachel, but no one ever actually stormed the site. Number 10, Devil's Hole. In the Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, about 90 miles west of Las Vegas, a water-filled limestone cavern sits behind fencing topped with razor wire, monitored by cameras above ground and one camera underwater, inside the pool itself. This is the sole natural habitat of the Devil's Hole pupfish globally. The entire wild population feeds and spawns on a single shallow limestone shelf roughly the size of a parking space. The cavern drops past 450 feet and nobody has found the bottom. The water is a constant 92 degrees. In 1976, the fish went to the Supreme Court. Capert versus United States halted groundwater pumping by nearby ranchers that was lowering the water level and threatening the spawning shelf. The fish won. The count hit a historic low of 35 in spring 2013. Recovery pushed it to 191 by 2024. Then, earthquakes along the west coast sent standing waves through the cavern that devastated the shelf. An April 2025 survey found 38. In 2016, 3 men from the Las Vegas area shot their way through the security fencing, blasted the locks off 2 gates, and waded through the spawning pool. Park employees found beer cans, vomit at the edge of the water, and a pair of boxer shorts floating in the pool. 1 dead pupfish. All 3 pled guilty to violating the Endangered Species Act. And that's Nevada. Bright lights on the strip, and behind it, plutonium blowing in the wind, ammunition bunkers stretching to the horizon, and tunnels full of nothing that cost $19 billion to dig. Every state has a story of its own. If you want to see what the rest of them are hiding, hit subscribe and tune in to our next video.